What's happening, Hardscapers? Today we're going to talk about DIY tips for a paver patio. Let's get into this. Now, this video is specifically for those DIYers out there looking to do their own paver patio. We're going to get into this from start to finish, my tips for you. Now, if you're interested, at the end of this video, we do talk about a consultation service that we do have available on our website, howtohardscape.com. If you're looking for a little bit more hand-holding, courses to go along with that, as well as our help with design and the build process. So stay tuned to the end of the video if you want to learn more about that. Link will also be in the description below. So let's get into this from the very beginning. My tips for a DIY hardscape patio. This begins with actually designing the space and functionally what that will look like. You typically have a back door, which you need to then decide whether or not you're going to need steps down to your patio and whether or not that patio is going to be a raised patio or not. So the best way to do this is to actually use a string line. Tie the string line to a post at the foundation and tie it to wherever you're planning to end that patio. You'll need a string line level to tie to that string line, and you want to make sure that that is level. This should be the proposed surface of your paver patio. Now you want to measure from the threshold of your door down to that height of the string line. And this is going to help us decide how many steps we're going to need to build for this. Typically, we range anywhere from 6 inches to 8 inches for a step. So we divide that number by 6 to 8 inches or whatever we're deciding our steps to be for that patio. So for example, if our measurement from our threshold down to the top of string line is 18 inches, a 6-inch step is really nice. So that would be 3 steps there, or 2 built steps with that final step stepping into above that threshold into the door. Now, if it's 19 inches and we want to do 6-inch steps, we'll just go ahead and raise that string line by 1 inch. And same thing if it's 17 inches, except we will lower that string line by 1 inch. But this is where we can play with it a bit, especially if we now take into factor the slope from that bottom of step all the way down to where we want that water to drain to. So if our string line is still level, we can then apply our slope to the end of that string line. If it's not level after we've adjusted it, after measuring for our steps, we now need to go ahead and re-level that string line. Then we want to take a measurement from our foundation to that end of string line or end of our proposed patio. Then we want to apply 1/8 of an inch per foot slope to 1/4 of an inch per foot slope. That's the minimum and the maximum for our slope. If it's a textured paver, it's a shady area, we'll probably opt for that 1/4 of an inch per foot slope. But if it's a smoother paver, a little bit of texture, and the area gets a lot of sun, we'll go ahead and go for that 1/8 of an inch per foot slope. And to do that, we're gonna go ahead and multiply the slope that we chose, whether it's 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch per foot, and multiply that by the distance from the foundation to the end of our patio where we want that water to run off to. So if that's 10 feet from the foundation to the end of our patio, we'd multiply that by our 1/8 of an inch, which gives us 10/8, which is essentially 1 1/4 of an inch. So at the end of our patio where our string line is level, we would lower that string line by 1 1/4 inches, and that represents top of patio. If this is a few inches above the existing grade and we've got a little bit of room after our patio, we can regrade that area to be able to meet where our pavers will be. Remember, this is top of patio, so that's about 2 3/8 of an inch paver, and then the rest is bedding layer. So we got a little bit of room to work with to build that area up. But if this is about 5 inches higher than our grade, we may be looking at manipulating our step area a little bit to lower that to be able to get our end of patio a little bit lower. Otherwise, you're looking into building a raised patio, and to do that, you're building a wall around the perimeter and laying your patio in the inside of that. We'll link an article to this in the description below if you want to get into building a raised patio, but for the purpose of this video, we'll stay on building a patio on the existing grade just to keep it a little bit simple. So now when it comes to excavation, I highly recommend that you rent a piece of equipment like a mini skid steer to do the excavation, especially if you're a little bit comfortable with operating equipment, because hand digging this does get very tiresome. This is where a lot of DIY projects end up stopping, just because it is a lot of digging. You'd be surprised how much comes out, and we get that comment a lot from clients. We also recommend renting a bin, and to do that, you'll want to know how much soil is actually going to be excavated. And to understand that, you want the square footage and multiply it by the depth you're digging in inches, and then multiply that by 0.003, and that'll be the cubic yards that are going to come up. But you also want to add a little bit of fluff factor to that, because once you dig up some compacted soil, it will fluff up and be a little bit more than that. So once we know how much cubic yards are coming out, you can rent how many bins you're going to need. We also need to know how deep we're going with our excavation, and there's a few different base methods that you can go with. You can go with a dense graded base, and this is a gravel or 3/4 inch down to fines as the base material, with a bedding layer or a leveling layer of concrete sand, but we prefer HPB or a 1/4 inch to 3/8 inch clean chip for our bedding layer. Alternatively, you could go open graded base, and this is 3/4 inch clear stone, so there's no fines in it. It allows that water to go all the way down, with an HPB bedding layer or leveling layer on top of that. And then alternative to those two, if you do not want to dig as much, but you're okay with spending a little bit more money for a material, you can go synthetic base. And these are paver base panels. They spread the load out over a wider area, they insulate the ground, and they reduce your excavation to the 1-inch bedding layer plus the 3/4 inch paver base panels plus the height of your paver. So this does definitely help out to reduce that excavation. Whereas if you're in a freeze-thaw cycle climate, you're looking at 6 to 8 inches for your base material, plus 1-inch bedding layer, plus the height of your paver, which is at least 10 inches for that excavation, as opposed to 4 inches for a synthetic base. Now with the synthetic base, you do want to make sure that you're hitting subsoil with your excavation, that you're getting that organic topsoil out. So you should dig some test holes just to make sure that you can get to that subsoil before you choose those paver base panels as your base material. So now you're gonna dig down and get to your subsoil, and you want your subsoil to be uniform to the top of your pavement. So you want that slope to be uniform so that any water that gets into your base is also following the subgrade out away from your foundation. And to do this, we're gonna measure it down from our string line, wherever our string line might be. We may want to increase that area of the string line, following the slope away from the foundation, as well as keeping it level from side to side at the ends of the patio. And you can move your string line around to be able to measure down from to ensure that you've got a uniform excavation. At that point, you're gonna compact your subsoil. Now, compaction equipment from these big box stores that you rent typically do not do a good enough job. Probably want something a little bit more intense to be able to compact if you want to do this right. Preferably you're using a jumping jack for your subgrade compaction, or a reversible plate compactor that's capable of exerting enough force into that subgrade. We like to add a little bit of 3/4 inch clear into that subsoil, and if it is clay and it's moist, we do like to add some Portland cement, sprinkle that around, and compact it into the subsoil as well. After that, we're getting into adding the geotextile. This is going to separate your base material from your subsoil and ensure no contamination or movement between the two. If drainage is more important to your project, then you're going to use a non-woven geotextile. If stabilization is more important, you're going to use a woven geotextile. Best of both worlds would be to use a non-woven geotextile with a biaxial geogrid immediately on top of that. And then we can start to add our base material. So if you chose the dense graded base, you're going to add a little bit of moisture or water to that to ensure that it's going to compact properly. And you only want to compact in lifts that your compactor is capable of. This is 1 inch for every 1,000 pounds of force that your compactor is able to exert. Try to keep your base uniform to the slope of the pavement surface as well, so that there's no ruts, that your compactor's evenly going throughout the space whenever you compact. Once again, measure down from your string lines to get to that final 1-inch bedding layer plus the height of your pavers. Typically around about 3.5 inches there, that you're measuring down from your string line to know that this is where you're going to set your screed bars. Now for our screed bars, we like to use a 3/4 inch inside diameter pipe that you can get from any big box store. And it's got an outside diameter of 1 inch. And this is going to be perfect for our bedding layer. Once again, we're going to measure down from our string line to the top of that screed bar. And this measurement should be the height of our pavers, minus about 1/4 of an inch if we're using using concrete sand as our bedding layer to factor in a little bit of compaction, or about 1/8 of an inch if we're using HPB. Set those screed bars, put that bedding material in between them, and drag a level across it to make sure that that bedding layer is perfectly screeded. Fill in the holes that those screed bars left, and now you're ready to start laying. Choose a corner and lay out from that. Make sure that you're laying your border pavers to that. And when you're laying, make sure to click the pavers against one another and then dropping, rather than dropping into the screed layer and then dragging it towards the other pavers that you've already laid. This will ruin your bedding material. Try not to step on your bedding layer, otherwise that'll disturb it and you'll have to fix it before you start laying more pavers. And if you're using paver base panels, you can walk all over those, no problem. And make sure to get your materials delivered. I used to work at a stone yard and we'd have DIYers coming in multiple times to pick up all of their products and deliver them themselves. It's worth the money to just have them delivered. That means dumping the aggregate, and if you're going to be using a piece of equipment, maybe you want to have that material dumped on the road and using that machine to get it into the backyard. If the delivery equipment is narrow enough to get into your backyard, maybe yard bags with this aggregate in it is helpful to have it just delivered as far back into your yard as possible. Where it needs to be is best, but definitely with the pavers, you want them as close to your work area as possible when they get dropped off. All this stuff weighs a lot, and I've seen people waste a lot of their time picking them up themselves. Just spend the money and get them delivered. Now that your patio is laid, and if it's square, you can typically lay to a full paver and have minimal cuts. If it's curved, you're gonna have to do multiple cuts. You're gonna have to rent a demo saw for this in order to complete those cuts. Mark your cuts, cut them in place. If you are opting for curves, you can lay past that curve, put your border stones on top, draw a line, cut that line and drop in those border pavers in place. Install an edge restraint. You can use a plastic edge restraint with non-galvanized spikes. Preferably, we use a concrete edge restraint that also has fibers in it for added strength to it. In both cases, you're gonna scrape away the bedding material and then install that edge restraint. Once that's installed, you can choose a jointing compound to install. We typically use polymeric sand or a semi-permeable jointing compound. Polymeric sand does not let water through it, whereas the semi-permeable jointing compound does allow water through it. So if we're using an open graded base or a synthetic base, we may opt for that semi-permeable jointing compound. It is about 3 times as costly as polymeric sand though, so that's something that you want to consider. And then polymeric sand we'll use in any situation. It doesn't matter so much about the base for that. You'll want to compact the pavers into that bedding layer. We do this after installing polymeric sand, though it can be recommended that you do compact prior to installing your jointing compound, and then you're compacting after installing your jointing compound to consolidate that material all the way down to the bottom of the joint, which is incredibly important, especially for polymeric sand. It will fail if you don't do this. You want to add a mat to your compactor or something to protect those pavers, because that compactor will scuff the pavers unless you're using a roller compactor. Make sure that jointing compound comes about 1/8 of an inch below the top of the paver or bottom of the chamfer before, if you're using polymeric sand, you start to activate it. And that is it. You're going to finalize the outside of your paver patio by adding topsoil, adding seed, adding sod, to be able to get to that final grade there. But this was a whole lot to get into for this. There's gonna be a list of videos in the description below if you wanna dive further into any of these steps. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more hand-holding for your paver project, we do have an offer in the description below. There's a link. We can help you design and help you through the building process, and we have a couple of courses for you as well. If you're interested, we'll help you through the design process of your project and help answer any questions along the way if you're looking for that sort of consultation help. Now, there's some limitations for this, especially if you are not located in the Toronto area where we are located. So we can't help you with elevations, but we can help you get started with your project. And if you can find a way to help us get elevations for your project, we can definitely help you deciding whether you need a raised patio, how many steps you need, and so on for that. And if you are in the Toronto area, we can definitely help you with an in-person consultation to get those elevations and to get a design to you as well. So there are packages for DIYers that are looking for virtual consultations versus in-person consultations in the Toronto area. Once again, any questions, leave them in the comment section below. Like this video if you found it helpful for whatever reason, and subscribe to this YouTube channel for more hardscaping content like this. Thank you so much for watching.